Hello ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Bundy here with another video children's church lesson. We are continuing in Hebrews chapter 11 with our series on faith. Faith is believing what we cannot see with our eyes. So we cannot see God, but we believe Him. We trust in His promises because He's proven Himself trustworthy time and time again. Now, last week we covered just one part of verse 32. So we're going to pick up there. We were talking about there was 4 people mentioned from the book of Judges in this verse, and we focused mostly on Gideon last week. This week we're going to learn that there's a big long list of things that happened in the Old Testament that we're going to reference in this verse. So again, we'd be here for hours and hours if we went over every single one of them. So we're going to focus on one, and his name was Daniel, and we're going to see what God did in his life and how he displayed his power because Daniel had faith and trusted him. So let me read you that verse before we do anything. Here's what we started with last week. In verse 32 it says, "And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon," that's who we focused on last week, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah. And he goes on and he continues. He says, "Of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith," so because of their faith, he's now going to list off a bunch of things that these people did. "Through faith, they conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions," that's the one we're going to focus on, "quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection." Oh, okay, we'll pause because then there's another long list after that, and we'll do that for next week. So this idea is that God, through our weaknesses, remember last week we talked about how Gideon, he was a flawed person. All of the judges were flawed persons. And whether we like to admit it or not, you and I, every human being is flawed. God doesn't need us. He doesn't need us. Truly, we have nothing to offer him. But guess what? He wants to use us anyway. He loves us anyway. And he will do great things even through our weaknesses. So today we're going to focus on the person who did this. Stopped the mouths of lions. Because there is an incredible story in an incredible book of the Bible. It's the book of Daniel. I always say I say this about everything. It's one of my favorites, right? You guys are used to me saying that. Daniel is one of my favorite characters that we read about in the Bible because he was a nonconformist. He didn't care about conforming to the likeness of other people. He didn't really care, even when he faced death. He had confidence because he had faith and he trusted God. So let's learn a little bit more about him. Daniel has his own book of the Bible, and the story that we're going to read today, I have an actual book, a picture book, that retells it. And if you are at home, you can grab a Bible, you can read Daniel chapter 6. All the details are in Daniel chapter 6. The name of this story is not called Daniel in the Lion's Den. It's called what? Can you read that? It's Jesus. That's right, Jesus in the Lion's Den. This is a book from a series I love called Tales That Tell the Truth. These are all true stories of the Bible that this wonderful artist, she does all of them, Catalina Echeverri, she does all of them, and she has these beautiful illustrations and retellings of these Bible accounts, these true Bible stories. So this is Jesus in the Lion's Den, a true story about how Daniel points to Jesus. So although the story of Daniel is all the way in the Old Testament, we know that the entire Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, is really just one story about Jesus. It's the story of Jesus. So even though took place a couple hundred years before Jesus was born. As a human, Jesus always existed and reigned in heaven along with God the Father and God the Holy Spirit. And so this was a few hundred years before he left the throne of heaven and came down to be the form of a human. But all of it is about him from the very beginning. So I'm going to move up so you can see the pictures a little bit better. And here we go. What does Daniel's faith have to do with Jesus? Even though Daniel was on earth before Jesus was on earth as a person. Let's find out. It says, did you know that the oldest stories in the Bible are a bit like puzzles? If you look very carefully, you can spot some Jesus moments. These are moments when someone in the story is a little bit like Jesus. We can never be fully like Jesus because he's perfect. He is God, and we can't be that. But we can have moments where we act a little like him. So this book is about a really exciting story of Daniel, but what makes it even more exciting is that you can spot Jesus moments in it too. There are lots of lions in this story, but every time you see this special lion, it's a clue that there's a Jesus moment too. So if you see this lion in the illustration, it is a sign that we should take note of it being a Jesus moment. So, are you ready to start the story? Let's begin. Do you have any habits? Maybe you sing in the bath. Guilty. Or twiddle your thumbs. Probably also guilty. Or stick your finger up your nose. Yuck. I'm not guilty of that one. Are you? This is a story about Daniel and his habit. It was a great habit, but it was a habit that got him into a lot of trouble. See, Daniel knew God, the real king of everyone and everywhere. Daniel loved God very much. So 3 times a day, Daniel knelt down by his window and he prayed. Prayer is talking to God. We can talk to him anywhere, anytime, and about anything. So what a wonderful habit. How could that get anyone into trouble? Well, let's find out. Here's our picture. Look carefully for the lion. There might be one there. So Daniel worked for Darius, the super powerful king of Babylon. Daniel was so good at his job that the king wanted him to run the whole kingdom. That's kind of cool, right? But the other people who worked for King Darius didn't like Daniel, and they didn't like the God that he prayed to, so they decided to get Daniel into trouble with the king. There was just one problem with their plan. See, Daniel had done nothing wrong. Nothing. I mean, he had sinned, right? Because we know we all sin. But as far as Daniel's job, he hadn't done anything wrong. There was no reason for the king to be upset with him. Okay, so, but then they thought of something, these evil people. They could use Daniel's habit, his prayer habit, to get him into trouble. Daniel's enemies got King Darius to make a new law. They tricked him. It said that for 30 days, no one was allowed to pray to anyone except to the king. And if anyone broke the law, they would be thrown into a den, or like a pit, full of huge, hungry lions. Uh-oh. Oh no! What would Daniel do? If he obeyed the king of Babylon, he would stay safe. So he wouldn't be thrown into the lion's den if he followed this silly rule. But if he obeyed God, the real king of everyone and everywhere, he would keep praying. And that meant Daniel would be lion food. What would you choose? Safety or lion food? Which would Daniel choose? Daniel's enemies crept up to his house and looked at his window. Daniel was... What do you think he was doing? If you said praying, there he is. Daniel was praying. They'd caught him. Oh, I bet they were excited. The plan had worked. So they rushed back and told the king. Daniel was about to become lion food. Now, does that seem unfair? That Daniel was going to be punished for doing what was right, for praying to the only true God instead of following the rule that the king had made, this foolish rule? It doesn't seem fair. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of things in life don't seem fair because there are a lot of times in life where you'll do the right thing and it's not going to feel good because there'll be maybe some consequences that come from other people for you doing the right thing. But what matters, what Daniel knew, is that it only matters what God thinks. So let's keep going. King Darius tried and tried all day to find a way to save Daniel, but he couldn't. Even the king wasn't able to change the law. So when the sun went down, Daniel was taken to the den of huge hungry lions, and he was thrown in. So the king's here, and he says, "I hope your God can save you," said the king. "Rawr," said the hungry lions. Okay. A big stone was rolled across the mouth of the den, and everyone went to bed. But the king couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned and turned and tossed all night long. And in the morning, he rushed back to the den. "Daniel, has your God been able to save you from the lions?" he shouted. And then he listened. What do you think he heard? Let's see. It says a voice came from the den. "Yes, O king, I am not hurt. God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths. God saved me because I've done nothing wrong. Nothing." Now, Daniel was lifted out of the den, and there wasn't even a scratch on him. Daniel had trusted God, and God had saved him. His faith has made him well. That's a theme we hear a lot in the Bible. Then, because King Darius was such an important king, he wrote to all the people in all the countries in all the world, and this is what he said. He said, "Daniel's God is the living God. He is the real king of everyone and everywhere, now and forever. He saves his people." He saves his people. The end? Nope, that's scribbled out. Oops, no, it isn't the end at all. It's time to spot some Jesus moments. Look back at the pictures in this book. There were lots of lions in this story, but did you spot the special lion? Maybe you did. He appears every time there's a Jesus moment in the story. Remember, it looks like this. Each Jesus moment is a moment when Daniel is a little like Jesus, the Son of God. And did you find all four? There was four. Let's review and see what they mean. Do you remember this picture towards the beginning? That's where the lions are. It says Daniel's enemies wanted to get rid of him, so they tried to get him in trouble, right? So here's the king, here's Daniel, he's helping this woman, and here's the friends, remember, not friends, but those people that were jealous of Daniel, and they tried to get him in trouble. But guess what? That's what Jesus' enemies did to him too. They didn't like him, so they tried to get him in trouble. But in his job, Daniel had done nothing wrong, nothing. Here's the lion from that picture on top of the chair. You see that, the king's chair? So his enemies had to invent a new law to get Daniel into trouble. So in his whole life, Jesus had done nothing wrong at all. Do you see him there on the cross? Jesus had done nothing wrong, so his enemies had to tell lies about Jesus to get him into trouble. So that's a time when it was similar between Daniel and Jesus. Oh, and this one where he was praying. You see that? It was right up here on top of the window. When Daniel heard about his enemy's plan, he knew he was going to be arrested and thrown to the lions. He knew that. But what did he do? That's right. He prayed. He prayed. And when Jesus knew he was going to be arrested and killed on a cross, what did he do? He prayed. He prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the last one was tricky. I didn't actually catch it the first time I read the book. It's on the robe here, the cloth that's kind of wrapped around, that the king has wrapped around Daniel after he came out of the lion's den. Did Daniel die in the den of lions? Did he? No. The lions were very hungry, and Daniel was as good as dead, but God, the real king of everyone and everywhere, brought Daniel out of the den. And did Jesus die on the cross? Yes. Yes, he did. Daniel didn't die. God spared his life. But here, Jesus did die. Jesus really was dead. But then God brought his son out of death. Just like he brought Daniel out of death from the den, he brought his son Jesus out of death, because Jesus died and then rose again because he has power over sin and death. You know something amazing? God promises to bring all of his son's friends out of death and into life with him too, so we can share in that as well. Can God really do that? Oh yes, he can. He has done it before. You see, one day, all of Jesus' friends will live with him forever and ever. And for now, we can enjoy the same habit that Daniel did. We can talk, we can pray to the real king of everyone and everywhere, every single day. Wow, isn't that incredible? That through all of our weaknesses, all of our faults, God has a plan to do astonishing, amazing things. We can trust that the battle is the Lord's. Daniel didn't have to fight those lions. He didn't have to fight and scramble. There was no begging and pleading for his life. No, he just trusted in the Lord. He had faith. We can trust the way is the Lord's. The way that he goes through his will and his will goes about, we can trust in that. And how does he do that? With our weaknesses. Daniel didn't have the strength to fight off all those lions, so God did it for him. We can trust that the victory is the Lord's. Because listen, it seemed like the battle had been lost. The war was lost. When Jesus died on that cross, they buried him, and it seemed like there was no hope. But was that the end? No. It seemed like there was no hope when Daniel was thrown in with those lions. Was that the end? No, it wasn't. God saved him. And after Jesus died, he raised from the dead, victorious. Now, I have something to help you remember this idea. So, just like in the book, there were those pictures of the lions. I made some too. Look like this. You can make some too. All I had was a yellow piece of paper, and I used the top of a Play-Doh cup to trace my circles, because I'm not good at making perfect circles. And you can use any sort of writing utensil. I used a little black marker, but I just traced the circle and drew a lion on the inside. And here's what you can do. You can look for Jesus moments in your life and in the life of people around you. So let's say you make a few of these, okay? And your sister or your brother, they share something with you. They were generous, they were kind. That's a Jesus moment. You can give them a coin. They look a little bit like a coin, a lion coin. Or let's say you make a few and you decide that you are going to do the right thing and listen to your mom the first time. You're going to obey. You're going to obey. Jesus obeyed. He was obedient even unto death of the will of the Father. You can give yourself a lion. So make as many as you want and be as creative as you want to send those reminders and little bits of encouragement to people, to yourself and to others. And remember this, trusting God, having faith in God will always be the right thing. It probably didn't feel like it when Daniel was thrown in with those lions. But even if and a couple chapters back in Daniel, in chapter 3, Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were thrown into a furnace fire because they too refused to obey a silly law to worship something else. They would only worship God. And you know what they said? My God can save us. But even if he doesn't, I will obey. Because they had the picture that this life, this is not like our best life now. Our best life is when we're with Jesus for eternity. And they remembered that. And you can remember that too. So I'm praying that you remember with every hardship that you face, that trusting God is always the right choice.